The Court of Public Opinion is a part of the Amateur Radio Network. You're listening to We Are Family Therapy Radio here at the Court of Public Opinion.
You're gonna see.
We're gonna take the opinion part out of this because we're gonna go based on what we see on YouTube and what we know. Because this is probably for a lot of people who don't know about what goes on in Afghanistan when it comes to human trafficking, sex trafficking, abuse, especially when it goes ignored. Escape from the public school system, the Department of Miseducation, the incredible amount of reports regarding sexual abuse of children, regarding trafficking, especially prostitution. Well, it's pretty extensive. So, I mean, we're going to touch the surface on it. A meetup group here, and we're going to spend a lot more time trying to research on topics like this because just for FYI, for some of us, it's new. So when we're talking about trafficking, we're talking about drugs, we're talking about topics that not just relate to what's going on in your neighborhood. This goes on worldwide. And I can state this because we were victims of the sex trafficking ring. In 1985, they were trying to put us through what they call the underground of trafficking. And reason kids are in placement are because of this very reason. We're talking about this topic, why kids are in placement, why they have to have supervision, why it is that the state troopers and police officers have to check in because of human trafficking. Just for the initial fact that there's a lot of other distractions going on. So this is just touching the surface on the real issues. Now, I've talked to U.S. Navy SEALs. I've talked to police. Well, I talked to one U.S. Navy SEAL. I apologize. The Court of Public Opinion. So, when we talk about like what kids have gone through, how they how they integrate the kids back into a placement, and how they get into a safe apartment and place to live, and there's a lot of reasons why kids have been removed from those locations for their safety. Generally speaking, because they're children, number one, they're minors, number two, and number three, a lot of them have extensive abuse issues, like probably more so because of we're talking about children who have been treated like little girls and they're little boys. So this is bothersome to watch the humiliation and the abuse that went on here. Now, when I state this, you're going to see the images, you're going to see some things in the second post. What I need to share is that there are families that need to get educated on what Farsi is. Farsi is a spoken language in parts of Afghanistan. It's Pashtun tribe. And if you do your homework and you read some books on it, you'll really get what's going on with counseling and why the sound frequency helps, especially with the blackouts and nightmares and trauma. Project 3 Recovery, with the help of sponsors in this outreach, helping victims and families recover. It's hashtag Kids Help Kids, anti-bullying, child abuse, neglect, and abandonment, which is handled at Children's Hospital. All we're doing is bringing to light what it is that families can do to work together. This is more like an advocacy between families who maybe deal with families that have these type of issues, and a lot of times families who are in recovery, and maybe they can share their experiences, kind of like the same idea with what Erica Harkema had been working with, but now it's more extensive because since that time, since she passed away in 2002, it was generally centrally located with children in our region. Now you got children from other parts of the world who have a slew of things going on, okay? So it's a little more extensive when you think about the broader outreach. Right now, centrally here, it's just basically meeting up and having a cup of coffee and talking, conference calls, basically just getting connected. And why we started it, because in fact, this is about kids who've been, suffering from, brain damage, as shaken baby syndrome, to, physical beatings, to severe neglect and abuse, starvation. I mean, all types of situations going on with families and kids who've either been through something or experienced it. So hashtag Kids Help Kids. And listen, there's a lot of religious stuff thrown at these kids. So what we try to do is educate on what it is that, Is there such a thing as a proper relationship when people talk about church and stuff? Well, what's going on here in Pittsburgh with the extensive reports when it comes to child abuse, when it comes to, forcing kids into situations to bullying. I mean, most of us can share some experiences firsthand, firsthand experiences with families, why the education system's like this, why the education system needs to be back to what it is. It needs to, the best way to help kids in especially when it comes to literacy is teach English. It's the best way to bridge the gap, because this way it doesn't alienate these kids. These kids, when they come to America, their goals and dreams are to become like an American. Like, the best thing you can do is not placate all these other religious beliefs and placate all this stuff, more or less. It's just teaching basically English class. I mean, these kids do not want to be any more left out. And that's the feeling a lot of these kids feel like. They feel segregated and deprived of some things because they basically need to know how to relate to other kids their age in America. They need to know English. It's a requirement also, according to the law. It's a requirement in order to become a citizen of the United States to have English. And to not further alienate these kids, the religious issue actually alienates these kids. It actually causes these kids to be more isolated. And they're already victims as it is. So that's why the PTSD, the sound frequency, does work. Now, some people might use the religious aspect. We're not going there. We're educating you on the facts. This stuff works. I mean, I had sleep. We were sleep deprived. Our case goes back to 1985 in Allegheny County. We could not sleep. We were having sleep issues for several years. Now, I'll tell you from learning this from going to therapy firsthand. The first 3 months are a little difficult, and once the edge lifts, once things alleviate from the adjustment, separation anxiety, and all the things that go on with kids. Once the kids get back into a sleep routine and back into a hygiene and routine, they go back. Kids are resilient. That's one thing you can say about kids. It's the adults that don't get the help soon enough. That's kind of the problem that a lot of people don't understand. A lot of them survive for like 30 years. And then I mean, really, when you think about how many kids don't get medical care and help, the severity of some of the neglect and the parents and the families that are involved in this, I mean, the severity is pretty rough. So why go to the hospital? Because this is a bigger mission and outreach than most people realize. When you think in terms of what goes on the border, you think in terms of what's going on in Afghanistan, and then you just here recently, this is last October, and I keep stating this, last October 27th, 2017, this happened to a little boy here in Butler County. I mean, they used children in trafficking. I want to share with you what happened to me in Missouri. A couple comes up and brings 2 little kids up there in 120-degree heat to steal to steal my tablet. This happened to me. They stole my tablet using 2 children, trafficking 2 children to steal my tablet. And I was on my way to go to Ozark Tech. I went to Ozark Tech at the time, and we were reading the book on Dancing Boys. In fact, my professor at Ozark Tech was the one who illustrated for us to read that book. And this was happening there in Missouri. And this happened, and to come home and hear about this little boy, to come all the way through all this and go to Branson and go to Missouri just to come back to Pittsburgh, just to be here, just to go through all this, and just to read the headline news. And then just on Friday, a friend of mine from high school, they're in the middle of going to court over false accusations, an attack on their little boy. This is bothersome because of the nature of the sexual abuse. That's to me that there's all forms of abuse going on with little boys. What concerns me also with the little girls as well. These people, what they don't know, what's under the radar, because I have to reiterate, I walked in listening to screaming babies in a daycare center in Glenmore Academy in February 19th, 1985. So I have a real beef with you. I mean, when you think in terms of what we're going through and what we've been through, it's just, to me, that much more important to talk about this. The outreach has to start there. They have to reopen these programs. You have to implement like block parent programs. You have to keep what works works. They what they do is they remove these programs. They start with these programs and then they like pull out of this. What they need to do is keep these programs going. So one of the things when I think about how to keep these programs going, basically stay with what works. They have the Make a Wish Foundation. They have the Bundle Up projects. Work with what is going on now, like Toys for Tots. Do those things that already are in place. What we're trying to do is just keep a group together, like a meetup group, a coffee group, a conference call. It's basically touch and base, because especially when kids are in placement, a lot of these kids, they don't have anywhere to turn to after they're taken out of foster care placement. There's nowhere else for these kids to turn to. There's no home to go home to. There's nowhere to turn to. I know this firsthand. I'm a foster child that has been through this all my life. Most of these kids have no family, no one to turn to. And that's the truth, because in fact, if you talk to my brothers, their foster parents just passed away because they were older. So the wraparound program that we're trying to put together, so that when they turn 18, they have somewhere to go. Like they have a key and they can go in and stay in a place where they could call home. A place to call home. A place where they can eat dinner as a family. Like when I worked at the restaurant down in Costanza's, Sunday night, that's dinner night. That's Sunday night, family day. Most of these kids don't have a family day. In fact, I would include myself. We don't get family day. We don't have a family that comes over to the hospital and checks on us. We don't have anything. I don't have a family that comes and checks on me since I was a little girl. I don't have anybody tucking me in bed. I rarely ever said, I've starved in this area. I've starved on the streets. I've been left abandoned and abused, and it's bothersome. So why it is we're reaching out to the kids like this, because we know it's serious. It's serious when there's no home, there's nobody. This is all we have is an apartment, and luckily we've gotten some funding and we've gotten some assistance, but we've written letters, and we're writing letters consistently. And when you listen to a representative hang up the phone on us, we're foster kids. We have nobody. There's no Christmas. There's no dinners. There's no nothing. So whatever help and whatever consideration somebody shows us, it means a lot. Most people block us and ignore the problem, and they wait till it's too late. And we're not going to allow it to continue. We can't allow the dismissive, passive arguments and passive attitude that people take towards us. It's so important to reach out to kids. And I want to thank anyone. I know there's soldiers that didn't stand by and let it happen. We're not going to let these kids just go ignored. Listen, when people passively ignore it, that just shows you the ignorance in the society we live in. It's ignorant. The ignorant attitude, the ignorance towards others, it's wrong. Common courtesy does matter. It does apply here, because you wouldn't want that happen to your children, and I certainly won't sit back and let it happen to somebody. And I know I've talked to police officers, felt the same way. I talked to a police officer in Hollister, Missouri, said the same thing. They can't just look the other way. Looking the other way is exactly why the problem exists. Most passive remarks that are made and the things that people say and do, it's not going to make the situation better by ignoring it. That's the way it is. Now, for those of you who would like to discuss it or have some comments and questions or want to be included in, believe me, we welcome the support. We welcome it. Even given it, $1 is enough to buy a cup of coffee. Believe me, meeting up for a cup of coffee. In fact, they have some really good coffee up at Cummins Coffee. In fact, the coffee that they have is it's homemade chocolate shavings right on top of the they have a salted caramel coffee. They have a ice cream coffee, my favorite, by the way. I want to also thank Natilie's North. I want to thank Manny's brothers for assisting us with Jordan's case. There's a lot to say about all the other churches that are assisting us, including Taney County Crisis Center in Branson, Missouri, including Texas. We started a bunker program for little boys, and it's the first of its kind. It's in Texas, by the way. And it's the first of its kind. It's a shelter for little boys and young men. Men, in this case, it's only geared towards men. We were instrumental in doing that because we wrote letters again, and that was with the help of Director and Becky over there at Taney County Crisis Center in Branson, Missouri. And you can thank the people down there in Texas, the National Domestic Hotline, who helped us put that together. There's a bunch of other programs. These kids, for the rest of their lives, are going to need medical care and recovery one day at a time. And believe me, the people that reach out to kids like this, they get a special acknowledgement. Because these wraparound programs, they have to be available. There has to be blankets. They have to have an inventory. Just like what happened in the Joplin, Missouri Relief Center, they have Operation Blessing. They can do the same thing. In one day, it can be done. That's how great these programs are. So we need your prayer support. Keep praying for us. We can meet up in a conference call and follow up. And I want to see not just an agency or program like advocacy, but I want to see this widespread. That way, when people say, hey, there's a resource center for this, there's a place for these kids to go to, they don't have to be stranded, left in freezing temperatures year after year because somebody just didn't care enough. That these kids don't have to worry about waking up to abuse every day. They don't have to be beaten. They don't have to be battered like we were. They don't have to be beat up with black eyes, and they don't have to be ignored. Thank you. The Mission at the Field Report and the Court of Public Opinion is a part of the Amateur Radio Network. Please, please, when you support us, when you get to, like, even meeting for a cup of coffee, it's like $2. Meeting at Sunoco for $1 hot chocolate. It's that simple. A cup of hot chocolate. It's that simple. You can meet up a coffee. Yep. Thank you.